Help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Yud Dalid. We left off on Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Let's quickly recap our sugya. First of all, we were speaking about a conversation between a father and a son, between Rav Yehuda, who was walking with the son Rabbi Yitzchak. They were discussing where in the Shemona Esrei does one add Anenu when they are doing a private fast day in a Taanis Yachid. The father, Rav Yehuda, says that we say Anenu bein goyel l'roifa, which means that Anenu is made into a bracha for itself. And Rav Yitzchak challenged his father by asking his father, Yachid koiveya bracha la'atzmai? No, that a Yachid should add Anenu, but the Anenu should be added in the Shomeya Tefilla bracha, rendering the Amida prayer into the same 18 bracha prayer. Now, we began challenging the Shita of Rabbi Yitzchak. We began quoting a Braisa, where the Braisa says that the only difference between a Yachid and a Tzibur regarding a fast day is a Yachid davens 18 brachas, a Tzibur davens 19. Now, by the way, when you read that Braisa, it actually sounds like Rabbi Yitzchak. Only the Tzibur davens the 19th, a bracha b'fnei atzmai. But the Gemara was trying to prove that that's not its meaning. Because if we're speaking about a Taanis Tzibur, by a Taanis Tzibur, it's not 18, it's not 19. We will learn, God willing, in the next Perek, that when there is the series of fast days that are in the category of a Tzibur fast day, then the Chazal added 6 additional brachas in the Shemona Esrei, making it not into Shemona Esrei, not into Tsha Esrei, but into Chav Daled brachas. So therefore, it must be that Yachid and Tzibur both refers to a private fast day, Eloma, you can be Makabel a Taanis Yachid. And as we learned in the previous shiurim, a Yachid, when he takes upon himself to fast, can say that L'macher eheyeh b'Taanis Tzibur. I'm taking upon myself the more stringent fast day. And even though it's a Taanis Yachid, he's going to daven Anenu ben Goyel l'Roifa. That was the question we had against Rabbi Yitzchak. Now, what the Gemara answered, first answer, which will stand, second answer, we'll go back and forth in the beginning of today's shiur. We have to just remember the Hemshech HaDvarim is that, no, that maybe the first series of public fast days don't have the 6 additional brachas. And therefore, the Pshat and the Braisa, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, is good. Yachid never adds a bracha for himself. Only when there is a tzibur, because it's a Taanis Tzibur made by the tzibur, then you add a bracha b'fnei atzmai, the way we do it nowadays, Anenu. Again, when there is a public fast day, there's 24 brachas, not on the first 3. If we can, not in the first 3. Now, just David is asking, Yud Zayin Mar Cheshvan, I just want to say something right now, as we'll learn today. We are learning fast days connected to a drought. There are other public fast days. They're not institutionalized in a Mishnah. But whenever there is a tzibur that feels, oh my God, something is happening, the locality, the chachamim of that location can enact public fast days, and we'll learn a lot more about that. Whether that's only in Eretz Yisrael, whether they don't have that koyach that much in Goyla, that we learned that Machlokes Shmuel says that ein Taanis Tzibur b'Goyla. Well, we're going to get back to that. Now, the challenge with giving that, just to chop the flow, is that there was another Braisa that we quoted towards the end of Daf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, and that Braisa reads, Ein bein gimel rishonis legimel amtsoyis, elo, that whether you are allowed to work or whether you're not allowed to work. Ein bein implies that there is no difference other than the question whether you are allowed to work or not. The first 3 and the middle 3 are the same. So how can you say that in the first 3, Chavra Halkop, there isn't the 6 additional brachas? If that would mean that by the middle 3, there's also no 6 additional brachas. That can be. We're going to challenge that today. So Vaiter is a charai that even in the first 3 you do have chav daled brachas. Then there'll be a kasha on Rabbi Yitzchak. So the Gemara answered. That's where we left off yesterday. The first 3 series of the range route Taanis Tzibur, you don't have chav daled brachas. Maybe the middle 3 do have. It says ein bein. Ein bein is only regarding yisurim, only regarding prohibitions. You could work, you cannot work. It's not b'chlal referring to davening. And therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak is not refuted. That's where we left off. We're going to continue today, 4 lines from the bottom, by trying to give another way to get Rabbi Yitzchak out of the challenge. By saying, not only do you not say the 6 additional brachas, in the first 3 fast days, maybe you don't even say the 6 additional brachas in the middle fast days. Then it's gavaldik. Ein bein, the first 3 in the middle 3, only isur asiyas malacha. What about the Shmoyne Esrei? Here it's 18 and there it's 18. With Anenu, here 19, there 19. It's not Chavdal. That's something that we're going to go back and forth. Whether the second answer will work or not, the first answer certainly does work. Rabbi Yitzchak is not refuted, that their machloika stands, and we're going to see how later Amoraim also, each one took different sides, whether Anenu is said as a bracha b'fnei atzmai, ben goyal l'roifa, or whether Anenu is inserted in Shemei Tefilla. Now, the Gemara today, we're almost going to get to the end of the Perek. We'll do the best we could. Is going to refer back to the Mishnah on Daf Yud Beis, Amid Beis. The Mishnah, for example, spoke about Masri'in, that in the 7 final fast days, you cry out. We spoke when we learned the Mishnah. What does crying out mean? Doesn't mean to blow the shofar. Doesn't mean to say the special Anenu prayer. What we are beginning in the beginning of today's daf, the sugya of Anenu now is mamish the Anenu that we have in our Sidurim. It's a relatively small passage. Again, either it's said a bracha b'fnei atzmai, or it's inserted in the Shemei Tefilla. There is another Anenu. You know which other Anenu? The Anenu that we say slichas. Anenu Hashem, Anenu Boireinu, Anenu Goyaleinu, Anenu Dorshenu, with all the letters. That's a big Anenu. That might mean the Anenu that's said only in the final 7 fast days. We're going to speak about that. We're going to speak about other times where that longer Anenu is going to be inserted. And then we're going to broaden this whole topic. And that is that even though we learned regarding a drought, there was a total of 13, 3, Taanis Tzibur, 3, we call that the middle 3, and the final 7. Afterwards, the Mishnah only spoke about Yechidim that add more self-affliction. However, if there are other tzadas for which the Chachamim could tell the community to fast, there maybe they can add more than the 13. And as the Gemara is going to point out, there's a reason why the max is 13. Now, there's a reason we said that 13 is Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, but there's a practical reason that in Eretz Yisrael, at a certain point, even if rain were to fall, the abundant produce won't grow anymore without a miracle. That's why when it comes to the rain issue, by the time you're finished with the 3 and the 7, you're so deep into the season that it's already not that great to begin with. That's why Taka 13 is the limit. By other tzadis, the Gemara is going to say, big tzadis, that we need a Yeshua, and if a Yeshua comes, we are completely saved. Then if the Chachamim of the time find it fit, they can enact more than the 13 fast days. We're going to have a big discussion in the Gemara, even though we spoke about it already by heart, and we spoke about the Tshuvas Harash. What should a locale do if their need of rain is very different than Eretz Yisrael? It's even different than Bavel regarding the same Talamat Lavracha. Ultimately, I mean, this is only in the last few hundred years that you have real Yeshuvim that live south of the equator. In the earlier Rishonim, Yidden did not live, not in South America, not in South Africa, not in Australia. No one lived there. Yidden, that big communities didn't live there. But still, we're going to have discussions as to whether every locale should make its own V'sein Talamat Lavracha or not. Even though the Gemara says not, we'll speak the Rosh. The Rosh differentiates cases from cases. We're going to learn about certain practices that some Yechidim undertook when there was communal distress, like falling down on their face during davening, the way we used to do tachnun, like ripping one's garments, like wearing sackcloth. These are not institutions that are imposed on all, but some Yechidim undertook it. We're going to do the best we could to share Shitas Rashi, the Marsha, different ways of understanding. On one hand, there's mechsa kiyuara. You don't want to do something that you look like you're showing off. Remember, we learned a few daf ago, can a person behave like a Talmud Chacham regarding the way they dress? Can you behave like a Yachid to undertake fastings, even though you're not on that level? Also, like, how much can I do that's I'm a show off? And on the other hand, we're going to see that there's a certain amount of even people that want to go beyond the necessary. They should not do something that shames themselves. So if it's a person that they know these people fall when they daven on their face, that person can fall. If no one ever does that, then they're being mevazah themselves too much. So there's a balance of mechsa kiyura, of being mevazah oneself. but going beyond the norm. And what will that mean in practice and a lot more? So again, we are in the middle of a back and forth. You have to get the flow. We spoke it out. 4 lines from the bottom. So the first way to far'en for Rabbi Yitzchak is by saying that even though the Baraisa says ein bein gimel rishonos to the middle 3, only regarding asiyas malacha, that would imply that we do say the chav daled in the first 3. So number 1, in the first 3 fast days, you don't say the 6 additional prayers. It says ein bein, that's only concerning isurim, not regarding prayer. The Iboy is saying, I'll tell you even better. You don't say the 6 additional ones in the first 3. You don't even add the 6 additional brachas in the Shemona Esrei in the middle 3. So enachanami, so they're both equally the same. The Iboy is saying, but emtsiyas and nami loimatzli chav dalet. But here again we have a challenge. The Hatanya says in another brayse, ein bein gimel shniyos. There is no difference between the middle 3 and the final 7. Ella, that in the final 7, Masriyan, you cry out, again we'll see, Shoifar, Anenu, and Vinoy Alamasachanuyos, you lock up the stores. Other than that, there's no difference. Again, in the final 7, for sure you add the 6 brachas. For sure. That we're going to learn that in the next Perek. Which means that for sure, therefore, you also say it in the middle 3. And not every braysa has to give a exhaustive list. The one difference are mentioned, 2 differences, Masriyan and shutting the stores. Maybe there's another difference. So first of all, the rule is that when does the Tana have the right to leave something out if it's some things? In other words, then it makes sense. You're not going to write everything. But if you're only skipping over one thing, it doesn't make sense. So first of all, the other things are left out. But the problem is the words ein bein imply ein bein. There's no difference other than. And the Gemara says, Yazoi, ein bein means dafke? No. I know for sure that daf yudalit hoshiyed teva. We will learn in next Perek that only on the 7 final fast days, one of the things that were done to arouse the community to feel the anguish is that they would take the Aron Kodesh from the shul and bring it out on the street. And when people see how the Aron Kodesh is being transported, it's going to make people feel, like the Shchinas and Golos, like we're being displaced. And that's only something that's done in the final 7. And yet the Mishnah, the Baraisa writes, ein bein. So ein bein doesn't have to be exhaustive. So the Gemara says, no. Imishum teva, that's not called a shiurahu, because only mila ditzniya katani, the Baraisa is only counting things that are done in private. Mila de beferes like katani. And therefore, we're going to go with ein bein. The distinction is a complete distinction. And therefore, we're going to go with the premise now that the 24 chevre are set in the middle. That will take away the second answer. It's not a problem because we still have the first answer. First answer is that in the first 3, you don't say the chav dalet, and therefore Rabbi Yitzchak will teach that when it says that the difference between Yachid and Sibur is 18 or 19, it taka means Sibur. Taka means Sibur. If there's a Taanis Sibur, there's 24. No, in the first 3 there is. The first answer stands. The second answer is being refuted, and maybe not. But before we get there, Amar Rav Ashi Masnisa Namadaika, that the 24 are, yes, recited in the middle 3. We add the 6 in the middle 3, as it's in the 7. Clear, in the final 7 you have it. We know that from our Mishnah, because it says in our Mishnah that this girsa is actually not the way we have our Mishnah written on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, but this is the Gemara's version of the Mishnah. Ma'elu. Ma'elu means in what aspects? It's almost like an ein bein. It's a stronger ein bein. In what aspects are the final 7 more than the Rishonos? The Rishonos means not only the middle 3, all the 6, the first 3 and the second 3. Ella, that's the gear so we have in the Mishnah. Shebe'elu, in the final 7, Masriyan, you cry out. In the final 7 only, Liyalanasachanuyos. Aval b'chol devreyem, but for all other things, Zev is Zeshavin. Guys, this is such a strong expression, which implies that they're mamish the same. We're focused on the 6 additional prayers, just like we will see explicitly in the next Perek, that in the final 7, they added 6 brachas in the Shemona Esrei, rendering it into a 24 bracha Amida. And the Mishnah says, that, what difference is there? Only the ones that are mentioned. Again, araya that Chav Dalet are prayed in the second series. The middle series has the Chav Dalet. Now, then maybe it's not exhaustive, but that you can't say that, because even if I'll accept that when the Mishnah or the Braisa, when a Tana uses the words ein bain, even if you're going to argue it's not a dafka, but the words ma'elu, like in what aspects is this different than that? And then the Braisa tells you in what aspects, it means that in all other aspects, they are the same. So the Gemara says, no, ma'elu dafkahu. How can you say that? Again, there is a difference that our Mishnah does not mention, and that is the teva. In the final 7, you bring the ark out on the street. In the middle, you don't do that. So the Gemara says, no, now what did we learn above in the Amid? It's not called leaving it out because this is b'tznius and this is b'faresya. The Gemara is giving a different angle. No, since the Mishnah in the next Perek will explicitly speak about moving out the teva, so that Rabbeinu HaKadosh did not find it important to speak out that differentiation here. He's already going to speak it out. So Taka, the Mishnah says, how was this different than that? The Mishnah gets to skip something if it's going to be spoken out anyways clearly. Now counters the Gemara. This will even allow you to use the second answer. Hashta the asas lahacha. If you are accepting this premise, this is a very important Gemara, that even though Rabbeinu HaKadosh uses the words ein bain or ma'elu, the difference between this and that, and he enumerates, you can't infer from that which he does not enumerate that they are similar. If Rebbe will speak about something explicitly in the next Perek, something about the final 7. If that's the case, maybe even in the middle 3, you don't daven the Chav Dalet. You don't daven the Chav Dalet. So why doesn't it say, when it says ein bein gimel l'shnias l'sheva ella shebe'elu masriyan v'no'el machanoyes, why don't you mention the 24? Because it's going to be mentioned in the next Perek. And if that's the case, my friends, Rabbi Yitzchak has both answers. Nekuda will be guys coming back. There's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yehuda says that even a yachid who's doing a taanis yachid adds the anenu as a standalone prayer. Rabbi Yitzchak says a yachid doesn't add his own prayer. No one was refuted. So now, my Havallah, who do we paskin like? So Omar Rab Shmuel bar Sasteroi Chen Omar Rab Chia bar Rab Ashi, in the name of Rav, they paskin like Rav Yehuda, even though Rav came first. Just the same shita. That what bein goyel l'roifa, that even a yachid adds her own standalone bracha. Rav Ashi says in the name of Rab Yanai, Berei de Rabbi Yishmael, b'shemei Tefilla, and we have a rule halacha kebasroi. Rav was the leader, but Rav Ashi. So therefore, the Gemara says the halacha is b'shemei Tefilla, and indeed we paskin that even it's amazing. Even when there is a taanis tzibur, even by a taanis tzibur, by us, when the yachid davens, the yachid doesn't make a standalone prayer. When we daven, Shivas of a Tammuz, we talk. First of all, we already mentioned we don't do it in Shachris, you might break your fast. But even in Mincha, only the Baal Tefilla does it as a bracha ben goyal l'roifa. He doesn't talk about Shachris. But the yachid, by us, and by Tisha B'Av, by Nachem, all of these insertions, all of these additions, we don't add a bracha, but we put it inside of the existing Shemona Esrei brachas. We don't make a standalone bracha. No. The fact that we end the Baruch Atah Hashem, Nachem and Boine Yerushalayim, it's in the Yerushalayim MERCAVA Rachman Toshuv. It's amending. You're adding another word in the siyum. But a standalone bracha means you're not adding counter brachas. Today we really say 19 brachas. We don't have more than 19. Okay, let's go weiter. We're like closing up all of the topics of this Perek. So what was not discussed in our Mishnah regarding all of these fast days for the drought? What about pregnant and nursing women? Which is we know, Baruch Hashem, we're married people. We know that aside of Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, Like now, the other fast days that we have that are of public nature connected to mourning, connected to the Churban. So lachatchila, right? Shivasa b'tamas, a woman who's pregnant, a woman who's halachically nursing. Just to make that clear, halachically nursing means a woman who had a natural birth 24 months until after the birth, whether she's nursing or not. I'm not saying that a woman who had a cesarean is mechuyev to fast. Just to know that halachically, when you speak about ubaris, a menikos means a natural birth 24 months after the birth, completely not connected to her actually nursing. So the din is that they have different standards. So says the Braisa, and we have a three Braisas. We always la'afusha b'machloikes. We try to avoid making a machloikes. Now, we're going to learn three Braisas that mamish sounds like each one has another opinion, and we're going to reconcile it in a genius way. Tanach on one Braisa we learned ubarois, pregnant women, umenikois, halachically nursing woman, misanis barashoinois. They fast in the first series. Now, what's the first? It's not clear. But let me just go back. The first, we're not counting the Yechid and Yud Zayin b'Marcheshem. The first series of three, we're going to call the first series, the middle series of three, the final 7 fasts. So they fast on the first, but they don't fast in the last. Second Braisa, it says they fast in the last and they don't fast in the first. Sounds like machloikes. Third Braisa says nishtahen or nishtahen ein misanois loy b'rishonos loy b'achronos. Lest you think they are arguing, comes along Rav Ashi and he says nekoit and tziyasa b'yatcha. If you're going to chop the middle, the metartzim kulu, everything will be resolved. What a beautiful ethical statement. You know, the middle path resolves everything. That's the ethical. The technical is a genius. In other words, chevra, nursing and pregnant woman fast in the middle series. I want you to read all the 3 Braisas. The first Braisa says they fast in the first. You know what the first means? It means in the middle. And they don't fast. The first means the middle 3. They don't fast in the final 7. Look, read inside the second Braisa. They fast in the ladder. That means the middle. And they don't fast in the first 3. It works. Then when it says in the third Braisa says they don't fast in the first 3. It means in the first 3. They don't fast in the achronis and the final 7. They only fast in the middle. And it makes sense because as the time goes on, the severity of the drought is more severe. It didn't even rain yet. So listen, there's a counterbalance. For them, they're weak. It's dangerous for the fetus. We don't want them to fast that quick. So in the first 3, we say it's not serious enough to fast. The middle 3, they fast. Once they fasted one set of Bahab, now their bodies are weak. For them to fast Nacha 7, it's dangerous for them. So not only does it make sense that they should fast the middle, start later, finish earlier, but it reconciles and it allows us to say that none of the Braisas argue one with the other. Beautiful. And Bachlal, the idea that Siyasa is always the solution. Mo elu yiseris ala rishonos. This is referring back to our Mishnah and Yud Beis Amud Beis regarding the final 7. That what stringency do we find by the final 7 more than the rishonos? Here, the rishonos means regarding all that came before. Elo shebe elu, in the final 7 masriin, we cry out. And ela masachnos, we close the stores. Here we go. My masriin, chavre, what's crying out? Machloikes. Rav Yehuda says shoifros. We blow the shofar. Now we're going to see details later. As we learned the next Pedic, that we add 3 additional brachas. By those 3 brachas, by each bracha, there were 3 soundings. Just to know, 3 times 6 is 18. We'll get to the details in the next Pedic. Rav Yehuda bereit Rav Shmuel bar Shilas, in the name of Rav, says, no, crying out means anenu. Oh, 1 second, anenu, you're kidding? Even a Taanis yachid has anenu. What do you mean? Only the final 7 has anenu. That's where the Rishonim say, yeah. Up until the final 7, the Anenu, Ben Goyal Leroife, Shemei Tefilla. This is the long Anenu with all the alibis. Anenu Avinu, Anenu Anenu, Anenu Galenu, Anenu Darshenu. That's the one you said only in the final 7. The one, you know, it's what we say in Slichas. That's the Chiddush of the final 7. Now, when we became aware of this Machlekes, we thought initially, man, the Amar Banenu, he meant only Anenu, not Shofes. The Shita that says Shofres says not Anenu. That can be. Why can't that be? Because what time we learned in the Braisa, that we don't detract. We never detract from the final 7, and they will have in them yud ches hasra'os. Guys, the word hasra'os clearly, if it's 18, what must it mean? Not you say Anenu 18 times. It must mean, like we just mentioned, it must mean shofar. Since there are 6 extra brachas, and we're going to learn by every extra bracha you blow 3 sounds, that's the 18. And to remember what hasrois means, Yerichai. Yerichai is where they blew the shofar, just a simon. So when they run around the walls, it's not about it's just about it's shofar. Now the Yerichai shofar is have. So now, guys, Gemara Rashi. I know that many people will try to understand it differently, and many Rishonim understand it differently. This is the way Rashi, the Mefarish, says over here. Ella b'shofar is the kula alma le'pligi the kol le'asra. Hasra for sure could mean shofars. Adds Rashi here, Chevre. We just learned the Machlokes Rav and Rav Yehuda. Everyone agrees that in the final 7 they only blew the shofar. No one says they said Anenu. However, Kipligi be'anenu, teaches Rashi, by other communal misfortunes. Shuki, it's not difficult, just it's not, you can learn it simpler, but that's what Rashi says. By other communal misfortunes, where there you also do hasra'ah. What does it mean over there? It's over here that Mar Savar, that goes on Rav, that Charidlei hasra'ah, that when you're going to read later that by other communal misfortunes, you do hasra'ah. In other places, it means to say Anenu and not the shofar. Shofar is exclusively used by drought and by the final 7. Umar Savar and Rav Yehuda holds that loy kori le hasra'ah, that saying Anenu doesn't mean hasra'ah. Hasra'ah only means blowing the shofar, as it means over here. Lamanda Amar ba'Anenu kol shchem b'shofros. In other words, if Anenu, crying out, could be done with saying Anenu, which is what's done in other fast days, for sure it means also a shofar. And indeed, again, Rashi, by a drought, only a shofar. By other communal misfortunes, when the Tana will say, by those misfortunes, hasra'ah, there it means only Anenu. Ulamanda Amar b'shofros, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he holds that whenever Chazal used the words that were masriya, they only meant b'shofar, never means the long Anenu. Okay, weiter. V'hatanya, this is going to be a kasha. How can you tell me that the word hasra'ah also can mean crying out with prayer, crying out through saying Anenu, when it says, all other tzaris, if they gather upon the Jewish community. And it's amazing how, like hashgacha pratis, nothing is mikra nikra. Like chichuch, if people have certain, there's like boils going around them, people are scratching their skin. Go fast. Chagav, locust, zvuv, if there are too many, flies. Sida, if you have wasps, those anti-Semites. V'yatushim, mosquitoes. And that happens over here. So today you call up what's called Terminex, and they go and they spritz. Mosquitoes, fast. If there's an unusual amount of snakes and scorpions, these are the words of a Tana. Loy hoyu masriyam. You don't do masriyam. In other words, masriya means shofar. It fits. If masriya means you pray, you go read this. Loy hoyu masriyam elot soyakin. You would cry out. Clearly, in that context, hasra means shofar. So midat sa'aka bepeh, hasra must mean b'shofars. How can you say that the word hasra can also mean crying out? It doesn't fit in those words. So the Gemara admits, yes, the author of that Baraisa indeed holds that the word hasra exclusively only means shayfaris, which is Rav Yehuda. But you can't refute Rav because it's a machlokes tanoim. The emes, if you need to, you can say Rav is also a tanu palik, but we try not to say that if we don't have to. Tanoihi. And the Gemara is going to show you from another Tana, from a Mishnah, that the word hasra is used in the context of crying out. The Tanya, al-eilu masriyin b'Shabbos, for the following tzaris, we masriyin on Shabbos. And you know what? The word masriyin means crying out. We'll be the Rashi in a moment. Dafkem, alir shehiki for gayos. If you have troops that are surrounding a city, so people in the city, they cry out to God, even on Shabbos, oy nahar, or if there is a flood that appears to be coming to flood the city, right? This is all davening prior to the fact. There's a floundering ship. There's a ship that's in danger of drowning. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, he wants to clarify that what does hasra mean? Only la azara. you can only cry out, not to God, to call other people to come and help you. Look inside the Rashi. These are, you saw this. It's 2 lines before the bottom. Mamash in the beginning of the line. Rashi, you can't cry out on Shabbos. Let's Tefilla. Why? She'ein anu betuchim kol kach shetoyel tefilosenu litzik aleim b'Shabbos. On Shabbos, b'chlal, we normally don't cry out for our needs. Now, there are exceptions. So this Tanach holds, when do you make an exception? When you know your tefillah will be effective. If you don't know whether your tefillah will be effective, on Shabbos, don't cry out. People can fabring on this a lot, but the point that the Gemara wants to make by bringing this Mishnah, by the way, this Mishnah is in here, and Taanis, Daf Yutes, Alma, I'm reading inside the Mefarish. Sa'aka speh kodei hasra. Clear, the word saka means we're speaking about you don't call avaloy litzaka. That's included in the words masri'in. The Fedish, other Tanoim held that the word hasra is also at least used for crying out. Look inside the words mipi moiri. Mipi moiri means that this was written by Rashi's Talmud, and he quoted Rashi. He writes mipi moiri, then lishna achrina. Then he gives another explanation. Okay, back inside the Gemara. Second to last line in the Gemara. B'mai, if the meaning of the Mishnah would have been b'shoifrois, b'Shabbos, Misha, it can't even mean that. For sure, you won't be allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbos. It's Isur b'Darabanan. Elolav. Imagine, first days on Rosh Hashanah Chaliyas b'Shabbos, we don't blow the shofar. But you're going to blow the shofar. Elolav ba'aneinu, and the Karalei Asra. So b'Kitzur Rav already has this Mishnah to rely on, and therefore the Machlokes stands. But you know what the Mefarish makes a point? One point, that in our Mishnah, when it says that in the final 7, you are masri'in, l'kula alma, it means shofars. That's the bottom line, the way Mefarish learns the Gemara, and let's move on weiter. Says the Gemara, Shmamina, b'shnei de Rav Yehuda Nesiyah. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we learned in Kedushin on Daf Ayin Beis on the top, Ayin Beis and Beis, about Uba Shemesh, V'Zorach HaShemesh, different Sadiqim. The Gemara writes that on the day that Rabbi Akiva was martyred, Rabbi Akiva was killed by the Goyim, Kiddush Hashem, in the most horrendous way. On the day that Rabbi Akiva was taken from us, on that day Rabbeinu HaKadosh was born. Just to make, and that was in 130 something. That was L'choyre connected to the revolt of Bar Kokhba at the end when the Romans won over us. So you can Google this. He was born somewhere in the beginning of the 2nd century. Rabbeinu HaKadosh passed away in year 217. The Goyish common era year. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyah was his grandson, who also lived in Tveria. Okay, he lived already in the middle of the 3rd century. So in the years of Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyah, have a tzara. And I want to make it clear, tzara does not mean drought. As we'll see today on Yudalad Amid Beis, God willing, we'll finish the Amid. Drought is one rule, and we'll see the difference. It's about timing. It's also a tzara, but again, a drought there at a certain point, it's too late. But there was a tzara, whatever the tzara was. So Gozar Tlas Esri Taanis. He made a gzeira similar to what we learned in our Mishnah right away. But you know how it was 13? Guys, remember, 13 means Bahab. That's the way it was, not one day after the other. From whenever it began, Monday, Thursday, we quoted from Baba Kama that Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the final set of luchas. On Thursday, he came down on Monday, Eis Ratz. V'loi i'anei. And he was not answered. The tzara did not go away. So Savar lemigzar tfei. So Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyah decided, let me add to the 13. Omalei Rav Ami. Rav Ami challenges Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyah. He was the head of the base. And they told him, Harei Omru. We'll see this Harei Omru is not so pashut. Harei Omru, ein matrichen es hatzibur yoysim idai. Come on, Chavre, you're going to inconvenience the public and nukshain. And because of that, Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyah did not enact. Now, were there yechidim? For sure. Individuals can fast, but he was not goizer on everyone more fast days. So when that story came about, it became known, Amar Rab Abba, look at the statement, Berei de Rab Chia bar Abba, I want you to know that Rav Ami the Avad, Rav Ami that told Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah, you can't add to the 13. Ligarmei the avad. Rashi says he did it for his own reasons. He didn't want to fast. He had enough fasting. Because Lav Dafka, it's correct. Yes, there is a concept of not adding to the 13, but that's only for rain. Yes, and Tanya Nami Hachi, Kishamru Shalish, Uchshamru Sheva. When it comes to other tzadis for which the Beis Din of the locale has the right, and sometimes they would be a goyzer, they would decree, they would enact public fast days. They're not limited to the 13. So now the Gemara says, there's one thing of Rav Ami siding with a machloikis legarmei, but maybe that the Gemara has a havamina that no one even holds of what Rav Ami said. Maybe this refutes Rav Ami. Lema tehevet yufta de Rav Ami. So the Gemara says no. Amalach Rav Ami tanoihi. No. Rav Ami heard they challenged him. Rav Ami could have said takel legarmei, but it's a machloikas tanoim. And if there's a machloikas tanoim, then as we have already today from the Baal Shem Tov, from Hasidim, that we're other than halachic fast days, the go-to is not to fast anymore. Today the go-to is to give tzedakah. The Tanya ain't goyzrim yosim shalosh esri tainis alat zibur. Clear. Lefi, the first white line, she'ein matrichen asat zibur yosim midai. This price is not only speaking about drought. A rule, it's too much, it's excessive. These are the words of Rebbe. Rebbe was the Tana on which Rav Ami based himself on. However, Rabban, Shimon, Ben Gamliel, Oimer, Loimer Hashem Uzem. No. Yeah, I know that by rain, drought issues, taka, we don't add to the 13, not because of this big rule, ein matrichen asad tzibur yosim midai. No, but for another reason. As we already learned to teach, Revia means rain, Revia means copulation. We learned that the Yoira rain really is 3 rains. Once those 3 rains left, we don't begin with the 13th. We begin with 3, and then another 3, and then another 7. In other words, by the time that you finished with the 13, it's so late in the season that even if it were to rain, significant growth is not going to happen. That's why for rain you don't add more than that. Okay. Sholchu late b'nei ninvei. Limit Hashem was that this is not the source. This is not the reason. He gave a very generic reason. If the reason why you don't make more than 13 is because of ein matrichen asad tzibur yosim midai, then you do apply that to other tzadis. Rashbag says no, it's not because of ein matrichen. Sometimes yes, matrichen. They all agree that by the rain droughts, after you finish the 7, they're not going to make any more public tiniers. Now, the next topic. Let's go to Ninveh. Now,
Rabbi, what's the correlation between fasting and a rain drought? Why does it dafka have to be? There's so many different ways to not to be matriach the tzibur, but to make the tzibur give extra tzedakah, learn extra Torah, do more mitzvahs, be ma'arich and hachnasas archim. Why does it have to be make somebody weak and hungry? What's the correlation between fasting?
So let's go. The fasting, that's a big question. Fasting is connected to tshuva. And the Alter Rebbe explains this beautifully in Egeres HaTshuva. So, and by the way, fasting without tshuva is meaningless. Mamish. You have to have tshuva. When a person is doing tshuva.
Not on Yom Kippur though, right?
Not on Yom Kippur, correct. Very good, Danny. But the concept of a fast day is a day of tshuva. It's a Eis Ratzah. Part of tshuva is going to be the resolve, the way I understand it, to be more observant, and being more observant demands discipline, and we express that we can do it by disciplining ourselves. By, if need be, we don't eat and drink. Maybe it's like we can do it.
A person knows what his tshuva is. Maybe for me, I could fast for 3 days. Then it is mach nishtais. To mach an enga mensch, to make him pay a little. To bring the rain, there's different ways to do it. Why
Whatever uses the words that really what came with tshuva was a carbon. Today we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, so a carbon is giving to God fat and blood. So you're giving your own fat and blood. And that's also tzedakah, because tzedakah, you schwitz to make a living, you gave your fat and your blood to make those few dollars. V'oid. Okay, let's go back. Now here's like this. Ninveh is unique. Nineveh is in Bavel, right? It's in Iraq, but their need for rains were not like the neighboring cities. So Sholchulei b'nei Ninveh leRebbe kegoin anan. We tafilu b'tkufas tamas be'inan mitra. They even needed rain in summer, which is an anomaly in that part of the world. So they wanted to know whether on summer they should say the same talamat l'bracha. When people learn the Gemara, they think, like in the south of the equator. Befedish not. Nineveh was not a huge region. It's a big city, relative, but it's like we don't want to have every city should daven differently. It's like it's in a region. So they were the exception to that region. So hey Chanavid, is it ki yechidim dominan? Should we be compared to individuals? Which means that we'll say what it means in a moment. No, so if we want to add the prayer, what happens if I'm a yachid? And I have a certain need. I don't change my Shemona Esrei, but I have the right, and it's actually commendable that during my Shemona Esrei in Shomei Tefilla, before I say the words Ki Ata Shomei Tefilla Skopeh, I'm going to personally ask God for my needs. Oy kirabim dominon. Or is it since everyone in Nineveh needs rain, so it's like a rabbim, and the Gemara speaks out, Ki yechidim dominan, are we like yechidim, and therefore, taka, we should ask for rain, but not as a bracha that is part of the nusach. No, the nusach of the Shemona Esrei is the same. We add in Shomei Tefilla, Ribono Shel Olam, please bench us with rain, oy kirabim dominan, and therefore ubebirchas hashanim. We're not speaking about fasting. They just needed rain. So we are going to daven in the Barech Aleinu of the same Talamat L'Bracha, even during the winter, summer and winter. So Shalach Lohu Chavre Rebbe responded, Ki Yechidim Demisu. No, you are not like a rabbin. You need rain, fine. You have your needs. Add your personal needs in Shomei Tefilla, Ubeshomei Tefilla, but you don't change the seder of asking for the same talamat levracha, and then going back to the same beracha as all of the other yidden that live in Bavel. It says in a Braisa, Amar Rebbe Yehuda, Amosai. The Amosai means when. This is going back to the fast days. When do we begin fasting on Rosh Chodesh Kislev? Because it's already after, right, the time where even the third Yoder rain should have fell and it didn't. That's only Bisman Shashanim Kitiknon, when things are the way they should be. How should things be when the cycle of nature is the way it should be? Then it begins to rain in Mar Cheshvan, and and we start to reap in Nisan in such a place, and that's also connected to your geography. Where are you living? And V'Yisrael Shroim Alad Masam. It's in the times when Yidden live in Eretz Yisrael, and even in Eretz Yisrael, the cycle of nature is the way God intended it for it to be. That's where you have these dates. Says the Braisa Abel Bisman Hazeh. Then Hakoy Lefi Hashanim. You know, if you have sometimes, if it's a warmer summer, you need more moisture in winter. It should rain earlier. It depends. It's so fixed. In other words, every location has its own agricultural needs, right? Oh, in other words, the Braisa clearly is saying that these series of fast days, they don't begin Rosh Chodesh Kislev and Bavel. It depends on the location. So logic says that if you begin fasting at different dates, because there are different needs, so then the prayers of that location prior to beginning to fasting should also be customized. Each place should have their customized prayer. Rabbi Yehuda. But Chavra, who gave the answer? It wasn't an Amoyer, it was a Tana. So Amalei, whoever heard this question, countered, Masnisa Ramis Alei de Rebbe. You're quoting me a Mishnah, you're quoting me a Braisa. So what? Rebbe Tanahu, Upalik. Okay, so there's a machlokes Tanoim. Now, my Havala, who do we pass like? So Rav Nachman Amar beBirchas Hashanim. Weiter machlokes Amoraim. We perpetuate the machlokes l'shem Shemaim. Rav Shesha says b'Shomei Tefilla. Comes along the Gemara, Ravina and Ravashi, and they conclude that the halacha is b'Shomei Tefilla. Based on this Gemara, many Rishonim concluded, is the Charaya that we begin davening in Eretz Yisrael Zayim Mar Cheshvan. Now that we established that Bagoylon 60 days after the Julian Tkufas of Tishrei, as we spoke on a few days ago, today that means in the Goyish year of 2021, and that's going to go until year 2100 on the 5th day of December, which for the Yid means the 4th at night, the end of the 4th. Hold on. Says the Rosh, whoa, not so quick. This topic was about Nineveh. Nineveh is in Bavel. For Nineveh to have their own tefillah when the neighboring cities davened otherwise, that's where Ravina Navashi says, no, you need rain, Shemei tefillah. But when you have a large region, says the Rosh, he was speaking about Western Europe, where their need for rain is very different than Bavel. He held in his tshuvas, we didn't follow him, that if a large region has a whole different need, they should daven according to what they need. And based on the tshuvas Rosh, theoretically, in all of the countries that are in south of the equator, Taka, they should have davened the opposite direction. They should have davened the same Talamat Lavracha when it's winter in Brazil, not when it's winter in Eretz Yisrael.
And then not say it?
And not say it. You daven when you need it, because it's not like Nineveh. That's what the Rosh claims. It turned out to be that in all of the three places, when they asked the big poskim of the time, whether they, Hashgacha Pratis, they paskin that they should say it as it said, going all the way back in Talmud Bavli. They start saying it the 60 days after the Tkufas Tishrei, and once they began to do so, then no one changed it. And the fact is that Yidden all around the world, if you are outside Eretz Yisrael, we all begin davening the same Talamat Levracha during, today will be again on the 4th of December, or in a leap year, the 5th of December. But on the other hand, if you need rain, then in Shemei Tefilla, you should ask Hashem for what you need. Another whole topic that we have to move on, that when you daven Shemona Esrei, it's a whole different sugya. Don't add your words in a different language. You have to be consistent. So someone who davens in English should daven, someone who's davening the whole Shemona Esrei in English, they can personalize their prayers in English. If we are davening the ideal way, understanding, reading and understanding Lashon HaKodesh, then you want to add a tefillah, which is very important, either in Shemei Tefillah or before the second Yehulah Ratzin, add it in the language of the Shemona Esrei. Speak to God in Lashon HaKodesh. Okay, let's go right. Now, B'Sheni, the Mishnah said that on Monday of the final 7 fast days, where the stores are closed, Matin, you open the doors of the stores a little bit, only towards evening. People have to eat farfasten, eat Monday night. So they have to buy food. So all the stores are closed. People have to buy food. But you don't open up the doors. You open it a little bit late. But on Thursday, there's also Shabbos. You're buying food for the break fast. And for Shabbos, Shabbos. So there was a certain thing that needs to be clarified. They asked in the yeshiva, how do you learn Pshat in the Mishnah? That's clear. That on Mondays, there are two dinim. Number one, the doors are only partially open. That's called matin. Din number 2, even the partial open is only towards evening. Now, contrast that with Thursday. Option number 1 is ubehei. On Thursday, you also only open the doors partially, elamah, the whole day. That's one way of learning. So Thursday is unlike Monday in only one, that it's opened from the morning, but it's only partially open. Or maybe Thursday you open it completely. B'Sheni, again, there are 2 dinim. Number 1, matin, it's only partially open and only in the afternoon. And on Chamishi, not only is it the whole day, but you fully open the doors the whole day. So Tashaman, the Braisa, we have clarity, greater clarity, the Tanya, that B'Sheni matin ad ha'erev. Ubachamishi, here the word is Peischen. The doors are completely open. Kolayim kuloi, because of Kavod Shabbos. Furthermore, if you have 2 doors, if a store has 2 doors, then one is open, then one is closed. In other words, it's not mamish open. Yeah, if you don't have an option, open it. Don't open it a little bit. But if you have 2 doors, leave one open, leave one closed. People should still see that it's in the time of tzara. It was common that people would have benches in front of their stores. That was better store real estate, because many times they would use their benches to display their wares, as we learned so much in the prior Masechta Shabbos and Eruvin. Anyways, if there's a bench in front of your door, then even on Monday you can open up your door. Why? Because the point of only opening up the door partially is you don't want the market to be properly open. But even if your door is open properly, but the people that are walking by cannot directly see in because there is a bench that's blocking it, that's already okay. Said the Mishnah that if the 7th fast days, which is the final 7, which means you already hit the 13th, and still you were not answered. And as we learned on this Amid, not only according to Rav Ami, according to everyone, that when it comes to fast days for drought, you don't add to the 13. You don't add public to the 13. But the Mishnah says, still, mematim b'masu b'matim, there's a certain decrease involvement in commerce, which is very undefined, a lot spoken about this. Ubebingen, and you decrease building and you decrease planting. So the Gemara is not speaking about masu matan, but the Gemara is going to limit the limitation on binyan and on natiyah. So we learned in a Braisa, you know what type of construction has to be diminished? Only the binyan shel simcha, buildings that are connected to joy. You know what type of planting needs to be diminished? Only natiyah shel simcha. Now, what exactly is that? Ezu binyan shel simcha. When you build, the Gemara say that when people build, they get old. When you build, whatever you think you're going to spend double. So maybe you can argue no buildings are joyful. But no, what building is building shel simcha? It was common that people would build a beis chasanim for their son getting married. They would celebrate all of the Shema Brachis in that beis chasanim, and that would be their starter up home. That type of building you have to diminish. Doesn't say you have to stop, because if there's no other place to do it, then you have to build it. If you have another option, then you don't do it. But if it's not for a newly married couple, then you can build. And Ezu Nitiyah Shel Simcha that you have to diminish, that's only Haniteya Ab Varniki Shel Malachim. The minig is that when a king had a child, the prince, the future king to be, at his birth, they would plant a tree. Right? It reminds us of the Sugya and Gittin by the Churban. But that was done here for kings. And when the prince would actually, when he would be coronated, they would take that tree, they would cut the tree down, they would build the throne from that tree. That type of tree you have to diminish. You clearly see that we are limiting the mourning. You have to mourn, you have to diminish, but there's only a few things have to be diminished because people have to make a living. You also, you don't properly greet each other. Oh, and this is something that we are familiar with. You know, you go into a base oval. Not everyone knows that you don't greet each other. So what happens if someone greets you? You respond. Well, that's Tanach Rabbanan. Chavedim, people that are learned and they know that you're not supposed to greet each other in the time of tzara. Them not greeting each other won't be insulting each other. However, what happens if you go amongst an am ha'aretz, means someone who's not yet learned, and sheshoyalin? So it's after it's a time of drought, and someone tells you good morning or shalom aleichem, so you don't ignore them. Don't ignore them. Respond to them. Lower your voice in a more solemn manner, but you respond. Another thing, these yichidim, they would misatfim. They would be wrapped, and they would always be dressed in the dignified manner. They would always be with a hat and jacket, and v'yoshvim ka'avelim, and they would sit the way mourners sit. Ukemenudim, or people that, God forbid, were excommunicated, kibnei yakim, which are nezufim lamakim, because that's the way we view that if things are not toiv, b'toiv hanirav anigla, that means that there's a certain amount of gevura that God is applying to us. Ad sheyirachmu aleim and hashamayim, says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar, regarding the final 7 fast days. Again, when you want to go beyond the norm, you want to express your mourning beyond the norm. So I'm already repeating the way the Marshal learns the Gemara. There is a value and a counter value. It's good. It is of value to do something that expresses mourning beyond the norm. Too much, you're show off. Or if what you do is always done, then it's not even adding anything. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, Ein Adam Chashuv Rishoy Lipol Alpanav Elim Keinene Ki Yeshua Ben Nun. Someone who's chashuv, who's going to want to express his mourning by being, I'm reading Rashi, mevaze himself, by not just sitting like a mourner. A mourner sits on a low stool. He's going to be prostrated on the ground. Only do that if you know that God is going to answer you. Because if you're going to go beyond and you're going to make supplications that will be, wow, you're mamash davening from the bottom of your heart, and the tzara will not go away. So Rashi writes over here, it can make it look like Hashem is like not listening to you. Really, Hashem is not listening to you because you're not worthy. People don't know that you're not worthy. So that's another detail that Rashi has. Unless you know that God will answer you, like we find by Yeshua ben Nun, that Yeshua, who was an Eis Tzara, he completely prostrated himself on the ground. How do we know that? There isn't a verse that says that he was laying flat on his face, but the pasuk says that God tells Yeshua, kum lach. And by the way, you read the pasuk, God tells him, arise, because your prayers were answered. Arise, implying that Yeshua completely prostrated himself. And here again, Baruch is not on the line, but we're going to learn, I forgot where, we're going to learn this soon. It's going to be in the next few Masechtas that there's a certain koyach dafka in Tachnun. Dafka when Tachnun was set on a flat face. And you're going to be answered by that, unless we're not worthy.
To the point that if you're not answered, people are...
To the point if you're not answered, people are suspicious about God. And really, it's on you. Oh. Lama, and God tells Yeshua, Lama zeh aton oh, Lama zeh aton neifel apanecha. Clearly, Lama zeh neifel apanecha is not a critique. God tells him, why are you fooling? I answered your prayers. Okay. You cannot put on a sackcloth. That's something that I never saw. Sackcloth is a material made out of goat's hair. It's a very coarse material. No one would wear it. Wearing a sackcloth was an extreme demonstration of mourning. Don't do that. Elam Kainena, you know God will answer you. And it's amazing that even though Yehoiram ben Achav was a wicked king, but God answered him. Shenemar, as it says, as Divrei Hoisha, there was a terrible dintoida that the king was holding. There were two women. There was such a drought that the women made amongst them, made a deal that when our children, Rahman al-Islam, will die from famine, then we will eat, our children will share. So one woman, Nebuch, lost a child, then she shared some of the flesh with her neighbor. The neighbor's woman lost her child, and she didn't want to share the flesh of her son. They went to Yehoiram to a dintoida. When he heard about it, he couldn't take the matzav. Vayikras begodov, v'hu oiver alachoima. And he was walking by a wall, and the people saw that hine hasak, that the king was wearing a sackcloth, and God answered that. But again, if you don't know that you will be answered, don't do that. Not everyone should say, I'm going to express my distress by rendering my garments. That's what the Marsha says. You have to go a little bit beyond your norm. Don't go too much. You're showing off. Don't do too little because then you're not going beyond. So Moshe, the Adam ben Tefilla, it was common for them to fall. Yoshua v'Kalev, their beyond was Kriya, and he says that from Moshe and Aaron, they did not rip their garments. That was for them too much. They wouldn't do that. Moshe Adam ben Tefilla, where do we find that Yeshua and Kalev at times of need they would rip their garments? Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna karu b'gdeim. Maskiv Lord Abzeda v'Temer Rab Shmuel ben Achmeni, that me'i havaksiv not v'Yehoshua, if it would have been written without the vav Yehoshua. So Moshe and Aaron did one thing, and Yeshua and Kalev did something else. Then I would have agreed with you that all Yeshua did was kriya. But now that the pasuk adds the letter vav v'Yehoshua, Yeshua did both. Now, similarly, again, the link will be that now we're going to speak about the coming of Mashiach and how the nations of the world will have to give an extra amount of honor to the Jewish people. But there also, the extra amount of honor, each one will have to go outside their comfort zone. So therefore, there'll be a difference. Like we'll see, kings, normally they don't stand for anyone. The kings of the world will stand up for the Jewish people. They won't have to bow down. They already went beyond their comfort zone. The nobles, which they bow down to the king. So not only will they have to stand up for us, they'll also have to bow down for us. So as it says, when Mashiach will come, not all the nations will greet us by standing up, and not everyone will greet us by bowing down. The Malachim, the kings of the world, will have to stand up. The Sarim, the noble people, will have to bow down. And Malachim Bekima, how do we know that the Chsiv, as it says a pasuk in Yeshaya, that Koyam al Hashem, Goyal Yisrael, Kedosh, the Redeemer of Yisrael. We are God's holy ones. Daf Tezvav. Now, this is how the Goyim viewed us during Galus. So Hashem is speaking to the Jewish people, and God is telling Levizoi Nefesh, to the ones, to the degraded souls, Lemesoiv Goy, to the ones that were hated by the nations, Le'evid Moishlim, to the nation that were ruled by servants. This is all the Jewish people in Galus. That you should know that Melachim Yiru. That the kings of the world will see the miracles that will happen, and they will give such reverence that they will all stand up for us. And V'sarim and the nobles, they will bow down to us. As it says, Sarim v'yishtachavu. Now here again, this nuance, metavav, anavav, maskabel Rab Zayda, v'temer Rab Shmuel bar Achmeni. Hold on, if the pasuk would have written here, it's the opposite, with avav, v'sarim yishtachavu, then I would have agreed to you. Hashadach sarim v'yishtachavu. It means that the Sarim won't only bow down, they will stand up and they will bow down. So there is going beyond, coming back to fast days, that there is an inyan for Yechidim to take upon themselves beyond the norm. Let's go with the Marsha, but to be Mahmud, go beyond, at kedei kach, don't do. So if someone never ever bows down, also bowing down is also, there's a mechsa kiyura. So, renting the garments, you can rent your garments. Putting on a sackcloth, if you never in your life put on a sackcloth, everyone should know where they're at. Just going back to Tzemach, coming back over here. In other words, that's what the whole shita. We don't fast, but we add. What do we add? What do you add? So the Rebbe Torah, Tefilla, and Tzedakah. How much Torah, Tefilla, and Tzedakah? So there's a balance. You're gonna exaggerate too much in public. Don't show off. Fair, disgusting. Show off. On the other hand, you have to do something beyond. I'll add a kapitel Tehillim. Every day you add a kapitel Tehillim. So we have to figure out something that we don't normally do and add that as our ways of adding to the morning, hoping that Hashem will listen to our prayers and take away the tzara. To be continued.
Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yes, Svika.
You ever been to a Afghana in Meir Sharim with the Haraidim?
I missed that. What's the Afghan over there?
They love wearing the sak v'efer.
Oh, they do that. Oh, I love it.
They do that all the time.
Guys, we're gonna have the aphid in next payday. Oh, yeah. I don't see the aphid. I love that. I love it. Who's that? Is that Kavan? Did he find the picture?
Yeah.
Yes, Rabbi.
All right.